So I'm going to talk about a research and professional development project that I conducted in collaboration with my colleague and friend from Ohio State University, Ian Wilkinson. And the goal of this project was to design and test a comprehensive professional development program aimed to help teachers learn how to engage elementary school students in argumentation during class discussions in language arts settings. And this was a large multi-year, multi-site research project. So I'm going to give you a little context about this. But to just kind of start us off and to help you get a sense of what we try to accomplish in this professional development program, I'm going to show you a short video of a classroom discussion. And in this video, we're going to see fifth grade students, this is right here, discussing a story. This discussion took place in the later part of the school year, during which this teacher participated in our professional development program. And in the video, you will see teacher using what we call like a fishbowl arrangement, where half of the class are seated around and discussing, with the teacher discussing the story. And then you don't see it on this picture, but there is another larger circle of students that are observing this discussion and actually evaluating it using one of the assessment tools that we developed. And then they switch. So that's just kind of to give you an understanding of what's going on. And the teacher and the student are discussing a story titled Deadly Hits. That's a picture from the story. And this story is about a real life accident that happened during the game of American football, not European football. And in this story, a boy named Zach gets a concussion during the game, but he continues to play despite this accident, and he eventually collapses in the field. He's taken to the hospital, and he ends up with serious lifelong disability. So the discussion question for this video is who was responsible for Zach's injury? Let me move this. So I also shared the transcript of this video. So you can, if you have it, you can follow along, just, to make sure that you hear everything. And I would like for you to just pay attention to things that you see in the video, what teachers is doing, what students are doing, because maybe we'll have a little bit of discussion after this, just to see what jumped at you. And then I'll talk about our way of looking at this video. Sounds good?
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry. How do I get out of this? Escape. Okay. So.
Off this morning. Okay, Johan?
Wow. I think who was responsible for Zach's injury would be the coach, because he was the one who let Zach play when he shouldn't, because he knew that he already had an injury.
I disagree with Johan, because it actually said in the passage that Zach thought that his team needed help, so he decided to go in because the coach wasn't trained to find a concussion. So he decided to go in on his own without the coach telling him to, because the coach wasn't trained to see a concussion.
I agree with Angela because...
Speak up just a little bit.
I agree with Angela because, if you wouldn't if you know we got hurt and we insisted to go back into something like that, like you would at least make sure that we're okay. And like I think Zach's coach probably did that. I think Zach's coach probably made sure that he was okay. So it's not all of his fault. Like he, as an adult, should like say no. Maybe you could go back in the next time, but like it's not only his fault.
So wait, how is that agreeing with Angelo? Because Angelo said it's not the coach's fault, but
Yeah, I don't think it's the coach's fault either.
but you said as an adult he should. I want you to just clarify.
Okay, I agree with Angelo, like everything that he said, but like it's not complete. Like, okay, I just agree with Angelo. Like what he said, I don't. Because like it's not. The coach didn't say Zach could get back in here. Like Zach wanted to, and he went in on his own.
Yeah. I disagree with Johan. I don't find that it's the coach's fault, because in a paragraph it says that the coaches weren't trained at that time or whatever to know what a brain concussion looks like, because brain concussions are invisible injuries. It says it in the story, so I don't find that it's the coach's fault.
Dad was hurt or
Just say now. I think
Yeah,
you
but he
want.
said that he was all right. So like, how's the coach supposed to know? Yeah.
Okay, so let's let him respond to that. They challenged you, right? So now let's let Johan respond. We had a few challenges, so let's let Johan maybe respond to that challenge, and maybe I don't know what.
But if you see someone fall down there hard on their head and come back to the bench saying it's an all right, the coach should know that they've been in an injury and the coach should not let them play.
But the concussion is
Does
an
anybody
invisible
here
injury.
know?
It doesn't mean
But you
out.
see the guy falling on the floor.
Yeah,
He's
that
trying
was
to say
that was
just like
hurt.
does the coach let you go back in? Does he check you first and then you go back in?
He would like ask if you're okay.
Exactly.
And he did.
But if you say you're
And he
alright, he
said
lets you back in the
alright.
game.
Like,
But
you're
Johan
supposed
said,
to. It's like lying. It's like kind of. It's not like your doctor's gonna be with you there.
Exactly.
It's kind of like lying to your doctor. If you say no, I'm not alright. I mean, if you say yes, I'm alright, but you know that you're not, and you really want to play, like, how's the coach gonna know? Like,
Exactly.
he has trust in his players. I'm sure Brian's coaches has trust in him. Like,
And like
his
they were
other
saying, it
friends.
was like his best player. It's kind of says it in the story.
Yeah, but Johan said he was knocked out on the floor. It says seconds tick by. That means like if it was like a boxing match, 10 seconds past, he would have been knocked out already. So he was like probably like there standing like that, and if he was okay, he wouldn't want to waste seconds just standing there
But he
thinking
got
about what
what-
happened.
When I get
Let him finish. Let him.
It's like saying you get an injury, you're just sitting there holding in pain, and like you can just get back up. That wasn't his problem. He couldn't get up. It took seconds for him to get up.
So what position?
he
Wait.
got
So
at.
what position then are you supporting? You gave some evidence, and you gave evidence from the article. What position then are you supporting?
Yeah, it wasn't his fault.
Who?
It wasn't Zach's fault because the coach saw he was like on the floor for seconds and seconds, and he didn't make a move until he got back up.
So you're agreeing with Johan?
Yeah.
So your position is it's the coach's fault. He should have known.
Yeah, if he's on the floor for seconds.
But I disagree with Angelo because he said he went in on his own. Zach said he felt in the article. It said that Zach said he felt fine. He told his coach he felt fine. He didn't go on his own. He said he felt fine.
So what are you saying then? What's
I'm
your
saying
point?
that it's Zach's fault because
It's Zach's fault.
yeah.
But that's what I said. I said it was
Yeah.
Zach's
No,
fault.
but you
No,
said
but
he
you
went
kinda
in
see
on
what
his own.
I kind of
He's just disagreeing on your evidence.
Yeah,
your opinion.
yeah. You said he
It
went
says
on his
right
own.
here,
No.
Zach decided his team needed help, so he went back
But
in
he
the game.
said he felt fine.
Right. So you're
Everybody's fault.
So you're agreeing. You're actually agreeing with Angelo.
Yeah. I'm not
Yeah.
disagreeing.
In a way,
Okay, let Angelo respond because I think you understand.
It says literally on page 7, so it's easy to see why less than 15 minutes after his injury, Zach decided to go back in the game. The coach didn't say, go back in the game, Zach. Zach said, okay, I'm going to go back in the game because my team needed help.
So it's not the coach's fault.
Not the coach's
But I don't
fault.
think.
All right. So any comments maybe about what you saw, what jumped at you, what you saw as interesting, unusual, or problematic, anything?
Pueden hacerlo en español y yo ayudo ahí a traducir.
Anyone?
I can make a comment.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's like the brightest one, but one thing that at least draw my attention. Well, actually, two things. One, if it's possible to clarify what's written on the board. It's like a position,
yeah,
evidence. I'm not sure. Is that like instruction, like a ground rule for talk, something like that?
These were not ground rules for talk, although we do have ground rules for talk, and they would be maybe like somewhere here. And this is actually a list of argument elements that we discussed during the professional development training. And this teacher wanted to put it up for students to see and they refer to during the discussion. So it had basically labels for argument parts like position, reason, evidence. We even have warrant that we've tried to communicate to students and teachers, which is a difficult part to explain. And then we had objections and responses to objections. So this was actually this teacher's initiative to have this displayed in her classroom. And this was one of the, I think, most rewarding parts of professional development with teachers, is that they take what we discuss with them and they personalize them and make it their own. So this was not something we necessarily recommended. This was what this teacher wanted to do, but it's totally consistent with our goal of promoting argumentation during the discussions and argumentation development following the discussion. So this was, just her take.
That's great, because I also work with like teacher professional development under Antonio's supervision, and one of the things that we are struggling, at least my teachers were struggling, was like how to implement this kind of like structure of argumentation into something that the students would recognize and use. And this is like, at least for me, it's inspiring to see that you can frame something or use it. And the other thing that's like draw my attention was like these shifting modes of reasoning, which is something that I'm not sure if it's probably correct, but the idea that they change from like moral reasoning to practical reasoning to evidence-based reasoning, and then come back and they try to draw conclusions from some reasoning that was like missing, and maybe abductively they were trying to put things together and draw some conclusions. So that's something that like a mode of reasoning that was changing, at least they were playing with different reasoning modes. At a certain point, it felt to me that they were like in this like Piagetian realist moral reasoning. The default
it's kind of the context of this problem. It's what's called a socio-scientific issue. It has, it's a kind of a practical, the question for the discussion is who is responsible for Zach's injury? And to answer that question, you would draw on multiple sources of reasoning. You can use moral principles, you can use evidence from the article, and that's exactly what the students are doing. So that's kind of the setup was rich in that way, that where they had the article. If you see, they are all holding the text on their laps. They refer to the text explicitly to support their reasons with specific citations. So that's exactly what we were hoping would happen. And they also draw on personal experiences and on just general moral principle, like if the guy's on the floor, that's not good, you know. So yeah, so I agree, it had the kind of variety of types of reasoning going on here. And to kind of go back to your first remark, this, you know, so one of our purposes was to have students learn argumentation, criteria, structure, key principles. So instead of kind of lecturing them about what evidence is and what reason is, we use this rich discussion context to have them actually engage in argumentation, practice reasoning. And the teacher, one of the practices that we wanted teachers to do during the discussion is to label their talk. So the teacher said, for example, at some point she said, you gave us evidence, what's your position? So she's kind of in this immediate context of students discussing the story, she's finding ways to introduce these difficult concepts like evidence, positions, objections. And she said, well, they challenged you. Oh, we called it challenge or objection, yeah. They challenge you, so why don't you respond to challenge? So she's using this language of argumentation and labeling ways that students talk to basically teach important concepts that relate to argumentation. Let's take one more comment because I think it's very interesting.
Yo tengo una pregunta, pero, o sea, es como para ver si lo entendí bien, porque en el texto dice el estudiante 6 en algún momento que estoy en desacuerdo con tu evidencia, pero no con tu opinión. Entonces, claro, me llamó la atención esa parte, y ahora que tú lo estás explicando, no es que ellos hayan recibido entonces un entrenamiento, sino que es en el mismo momento en que ellos van como aprendiendo, por así decirlo, estas como etiquetas de qué es una evidencia, qué es una opinión. Eso no sé si me gustaría que comentara.
Ingrid is saying that she that she noted that one student 6 said, I disagree, or I don't disagree with your evidence, but I disagree with your opinion, or the other way around, I don't remember. So that was interesting, and she wanted to ask you whether you can comment on, basically, because what you are saying is that you didn't taught them in advance what was an evidence, what was an opinion, and so on. So that was something that they were learning through the discussions. So yeah.
That's exactly correct. And it's this phrase, you know, I disagree on your, they disagree on your evidence, not on your opinion, or something, whatever, I don't have a transcript in front of me, is one of the reasons I chose this clip, because it's such a good demonstration of kind of what are the possibilities of this format, discussion format. Of course, we don't see this often. This is pretty cool to hear things like this from 5th graders. But it is the idea, you know, the idea is that by, you know, by discussing authentic questions, controversial questions that students care about, they practice using argumentation, and the teacher structures that experience and helps them learn about the important functions of different elements of an argument, and they internalize it. Eventually it becomes their own, and they use it when appropriate. And so this is what we observed. We basically observed this Vygotskian theory of internalization in this video, and that's something we want to see. Now, again, we didn't teach it explicitly, but they had a lot of, this is towards the end of the year, where they had several months of participating in discussions like this. So they've had these experiences where they do what they're doing, on this video, and have the teacher again bring their attention, bring awareness to argumentation processes. Also, at the end of the discussion, we always have a closure where they kind of discuss what kind of arguments they constructed, like what do we think now, what our strongest reasons, what's our strongest evidence. So they've been practicing using that terminology for almost a school year. We also have post-discussion activities where after the discussion they write, read, or talk in a, for example, with a peer, not necessarily with a big group. So they do some kind of other post-discussion activity where they continue to practice. So for example, for this discussion, students could write a letter to the principal individually about what they think the strongest arguments were, what their position, what their argument is now after the discussion. They could stage, a news release about this. Like there could be multiple ways to further engage students, kind of build on this rich content that was generated during the discussion, and have them more individually practice those same skills. So that's the reason they are fluent in some way with this terminology, even though we did not lecture them about it. It's all coming from them actually using it in educationally rich contexts.
Alina, can I just point out a brief thing? It might be obvious, but of course it's so nice to see like a kind of engaged discussion. I mean, so many counter arguments, so that yeah, that's a very good point. We do. We had a very clear goal of not turning this into another boring school task. Like this was very important for us, which is difficult because we also had a very clear goal of having this be rigorous. We did not want students to just exchange like unexamined opinions. And that's what we often see in open discussions where students just say what they think, and then the next person says what they think, and it just goes in this kind of sequential fashion without students really interrogating each other's reasoning. This teacher actually called this, and that was again her idea, her language, she called it popcorn talk. And she explicitly told students, like it was popcorn where, there's just ideas popping up and disappearing in the discussion, like popcorn. And she explicitly told students, let's not do popcorn talk. Let's connect to each other's ideas, respond to each other's ideas. And they've practiced doing it successfully. The other reason for this high level of engagement, which I think is very important, is that we very carefully chose stories and questions, discussion questions that provoked disagreement and also were relevant and important to students. So this story, again, we've kind of done this professional development over 3 years in an iterative fashion, trying different versions of stories and strategies. And so, for example, this story is one of our winners. It's a story that always provokes heated discussions and a lot of disagreements. And again, the teachers also, the teachers were trained to build on that disagreement or even introduce it or somehow promote it if it was not naturally happening. So there are a lot of thought and structure that went into creating this level of engagement. But this is something we struggled with because
as I said, like the more you structure it or make it, I don't know, rule-based and proper and, and teacher-like or school-like, the less engagement there is. And so while we wanted students to learn very specific things about argumentation, and we wanted argumentation to have high quality, which means that they needed to rely on clear criteria of what's acceptable, what's relevant, and how do you put these ideas together. But at the same time, we also wanted them to be authentic, free to express what they think and react to each other's ideas. So there is a tension there that we sort of struggled with, and there is really no good answer today about how much teacher intervention or teacher intervention is optimal to sustain both engagement and quality and rigor, and that's something that we keep thinking about. So good question too. Well, I'm gonna move to kind of review our way of thinking about this discussion, what we try to accomplish. So we call this type of talk that you just observed inquiry dialogue, taking this label from Walton's taxonomy of dialogues, where he identified 6 dialogue types and specified specific aims, norms, and practices of each type. So the aim of inquiry dialogue is to collectively find the most reasonable answer to a contestable question. So the purpose is not to convince others, as in persuasion, or to make concessions to reach an agreement as a negotiation, which is another way to argue, but rather to use best available reasons and evidence together to advance towards the truth. So we chose this type of dialogue specifically based on the work of philosophy for children scholars like Mon Gregory and Susan Gardner. And these scholars highlighted the directional nature of inquiry as an essential feature of productive discussions. So inquiry dialogue has cumulative quality, meaning that there is a systematic movement towards the truth, even if it remains unreachable ideal. So it's not the answer. We don't believe that at the end of the discussion, students will find the truth, but we think that the movement towards the truth is important, where some reasons or positions or evidence are being eliminated in this process of moving towards the truth. So we see inquiry dialogue as not teacher-centered or student-centered, but truth-centered, meaning that the goal, again, is to work together to advance, to eliminate certain prepositions in this advancement towards the truth. And this goal of finding the most reasonable answer, again, requires certain rigor in the way that students discuss, participate in the discussion. And that's why it places heavy demands on both teachers and students, because they have to not only express what they think, but listen to what others think, relate their statements to what others say, find flaws in others' arguments, and all of this have to be happening in real time. So we assumed that, and based on evidence we know from other studies, that these kind of skills are not readily available for both students and teachers. So we spent a lot of time working with teachers to develop this new strategies of scaffolding student talk. And we also expected that teacher scaffolding, teacher intervention during the discussion would be relatively high at the beginning, because again, we know from literature that students don't possess argumentation skills. They do possess them, but there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. Students don't know how to argue well. They do know how to argue, but they don't know how to argue well. So we expected that teacher intervention would be relatively high at the beginning, but again, with this Vygotskian ideas of students internalizing discourse practices first introduced or modeled by the teacher or other students, eventually the teacher intervention should decrease, and the teacher ideally would eventually become just one of the participants, and the students will adopt facilitation strategies and argumentation practices that they've been observing as they participated in the discussion. And another assumption we made is that when teacher intervenes, her intervention should be clearly procedural rather than substantive, meaning that the teacher should not be telling students what she thinks or what she thinks they should think, but she should be commenting on processes of argumentation. And we actually describe those processes very specifically in one of our instructional and assessment tools that I will hopefully get to talk about. And I also wanted to mention that, so these assumptions that I just described, that inquiry dialogue is the model that we want to use, and that teacher should be present in the discussion. Like we saw teacher intervening in this clip several times, and that her comments should be about procedures or processes of argumentation. All of these assumptions are what we think is best to support argumentation development. And I want to mention that there are other models and successful models too that rely on completely different, not completely different, but very different assumptions about how to best support the development of argumentation. And a very good example is the work of Diana Kuhn and her colleagues, where the teacher is just not present, and it's very carefully designed curriculum materials that do the work of modeling practices of good argumentation, and the model, the type of dialogue that Kuhn and colleagues are promoting in their pedagogical approach is persuasion. So they focus on debates where students kind of set up to discuss controversial issues. They're supplied with a lot of materials where they can get reasons and evidence on both sides. I mean, it's a completely different model. And I just want to say that that's an interesting research issue, if anybody is looking for one, to see what are the affordances and limitations of these different assumptions that people make today about how to best support student learning of argumentation. Because we really, until now, have been comparing this innovative approaches, like, let's say what we are doing and what Diana Kuhn is doing. We typically compare it to typical instructions or regular instructions, or in other words, instruction where argumentation does not happen that much. So to just kind of realize that we're all making assumptions about what the best approach is, and that we may be gaining and losing something when we focus on a particular type of dialogue, on a particular way of teacher scaffolding versus just peer interaction. And these are interesting questions to pursue. So let me tell you a little bit about this study and how we approached it before I focus on one of the tools that we used. So basically, in this project, we did what I just said everybody else is doing, which is we didn't get to compare our assumptions about the best way to support argumentation with those of other researchers. We tried to develop a program and then compare it to typical instruction. And the project lasted for 3 years, and each year we worked with a new cohort of teachers. We tried a version of a professional development program, collected data to evaluate its effectiveness, and then revised it based on this data. And then in the next year, introduced the revised version and did it again. And so we did it 3 times. And in year 3, so in year 1 and 2, we used what's called a design study, where we worked collaboratively with teachers to develop an intervention that would have a chance of withstanding the challenges of everyday practice. We relied on our teacher participants, like the teacher you saw in the video, to bring their expertise and experiences to inform us what works and what doesn't work in this messy, real life setting of elementary school classroom. And so we did very small studies in year 1 and 2. We had maybe like 4 or 5 teachers at each site, and we didn't have a control group because we just wanted to get as much information as possible from the teachers, with the teachers, to figure out what are the effective curriculum materials and strategies for teachers to learn this, and for their students to learn this content. And then in the 3rd year, we conducted a randomized pre-post experimental study where about 26 teachers participated in, no, I think it was less. Like 14 teachers participated in our professional development, and the other 14 didn't. And we implemented our year-long professional development program and then evaluated the outcomes. So in our year 3, I just want to briefly review what we ended up with. So our professional development in the end lasted for 36 contact hours, and we were in schools from October through April. So again, very labor intensive, and it's not a one-day workshop. It's really prolonged professional development with a lot of individual attention to teachers. So during this program, we have 2 days of workshops where we kind of introduced the program to teachers. After that, we met with teachers bi-weekly, and then we kind of reduced this involvement. At the end of the program, we only met once a month for this after-school study group meetings, where we practiced facilitation, discussed challenges that teachers encountered in their classrooms, and introduced new concepts. And we also videotaped teacher discussions every month. And we had 6 individual coaching sessions with the teacher, where the teachers watched their own video with what we called a discourse coach, a person from our research team, a well-trained person from our research team who helped the teacher reflect on their own facilitation and student argumentation using an assessment tool that we've developed, and also discussing any kind of challenges or accomplishments as they watched the discussion. And we had focus group interviews with teachers. And again, we collected pre-test and post-test data from teachers and students and analyzed it. So there's a lot of very rich data. So just to give you a sense, these are pictures of our workshops and study groups and focus group meetings, and we videotaped all of our professional development activities So we had tons of data. We videotaped the discussions. These are these individual coaching sessions where this is our discourse coach working with the teacher as they watch the video, and they also have an instrument that they use to draw their attention to specific aspects of the discussion and then reflect on how successful these are. And as I said, we also tested students to see whether participating in this discussion actually transferred to individual competences of reading, writing, and speaking individually. So we published a lot of academic articles from this project, but what we also done, and this was a very fun project, is to write a book for teachers where we basically presented our instructional materials, practices, and assessment tools, and kind of explained how this could be used in a professional development setting. And so how much more time do I have, Antonia?
Sorry, I don't know what. 10. Probably 5-10 minutes at maximum to have 30 minutes to questions and discussion.
Okay, yeah. All right, so I'll skip a couple of things. Yeah, so let me just very briefly in the last 5 minutes introduce you this instructional observational tool that we developed called argumentation rating tool, which became very central to our professional development program. We, you know, it helped. Well, let me tell you about it. It basically became like a textbook for what we expected teachers to learn. And it also was very helpful for teachers as they facilitated the discussion and also reflected on their own facilitation. So it's, you see this, this is my colleague Ian Wilkinson holding this. It's like a 12-page booklet that we've developed. And what we tried to do in this project is we very quickly realized that in order for us to succeed with this goal of helping teachers develop the ability to facilitate argumentation during discussions, we had to figure out the way to clearly explain key criteria of what quality argumentation means. We have to identify those criteria and explain them in the language that teachers and students can understand. So this, so first we identified this key criteria of good arguments, and we got this criteria from literature, scholarship on formal logic, informal logic, critical thinking, argumentation. So from all these philosophy books, but then we translated it into practical language that, again, teachers and students can understand. So these are things like we need to consider different perspectives. We need to be clear in language and structure our arguments. We need to use well-examined and accurate reasons and evidence, and we have to be logical, or we have to connect our reasons and evidence well. But like having this criteria doesn't really help teachers to know specifically what to do during the discussion. And so what we've done is we identified key practices that the teachers can use to enforce a particular criteria. So if we look at clarity, for example, if things are not clear, these are 4 key practices that the teachers can use to improve, enhance the quality. She can clarify meaning, work on connecting ideas, work on labeling moves and parts and argument. And this is a more general, she can kind of summarize or track the line of inquiry or have the students summarize it. So just so having these practices is also just having them kind of stated here, like these are the 4 practices, go ahead and use them, is still not enough for teachers to, again, know specifically what to do. So we took each of these practices, and we're just going to look at one, and further explain the specified it for teacher by turning it into like a rating scale. And so if we look at just one, connecting ideas, here it is. You can see like a page from this argumentation rating tool where you can see a rating scale here going from 1 to 6. And we have teacher, kind of what teachers should be doing to be at the advancing level, and what students should be saying or doing to be at the advancing level. So again, let's just look at this description a little closer. So here we are. You can see that in this kind of first part, we explain the principle, like the teacher should clarifies the reasoning by making visible connections. The teacher prompts students to relate their idea to what's been said for others in specific ways. And this is a very important, this is a very important sentence here. This happens whenever students fail to build on or challenge each other's arguments. So we kind of structured our tool to have teachers intervene only when and if it's necessary. And that is very different from other previous tools that we've reviewed when we were working on this project, where having more of certain discourse practices is considered to be better. So the more times the teacher says something like, how are you agreeing with, or which part are you agreeing with, the better, the higher the score the teacher will get. Well, we took a different approach because we think that if the students are doing a good job on a particular practice, like if they're connecting to each other well, the teacher should not be intervening and should not be getting high scores for saying things, right? So again, this is this idea of gradual release of responsibility, where if students are doing well, there is no need for teachers to intervene. So our tool is structured not as more is better, and not as less is more. We want teacher to be there, but only when necessary. And here in italics, you see that we actually gave teachers specific expressions or stems or talk moves that they can use, although these are obviously just examples. And we saw teachers not, kind of, they really wanted this on the one hand, but they also were able to personalize it, internalize it, and develop their own language. So these were just kind of the starters at the beginning of the project, but we did observe that teachers were able to develop their own ways of expressing similar ideas. I think I'll have to stop here, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, it might be a good idea, but you can, I don't know, you want a couple of more minutes to close? That's okay.
Okay, so let me just see. So this argumentation rating tool ended up being, again, very central to our professional development efforts. This kind of 4 criteria gave us a structure. So we kind of discuss each criteria. We introduced the entire tool, but then we focused on each criteria. So it kind of gave us a structure of how to approach the sequence of professional development. We also use this argumentation rating tool during these coaching sessions, where the teachers would watch a segment of the video, their own video, and then assign a score to themselves, but not because we wanted to grade them, but just to kind of engage them in a critical reflection on their performance with the coach. So they would say, well, maybe I'm 5, What do you think? Maybe I could do more. And this was just kind of a prompt for helping teachers evaluate their own practice. The teachers also had like a one-page version of this tool, which they often took with them to the discussion, and just kind of to remind themselves what is it that they were supposed to be doing, especially at the beginning. This was, again, we worked with teachers to learn what they need. And so this is something that they suggested and asked us to do, because again, they were too new to this practice and they wanted like a cheat sheet, a reminder about what they're supposed to do. And then we also use that same tool to evaluate their progress from the pre to post-test discussions during our professional development. If I have one more minute, I just wanted to show you, do I have one more minute, Antonia?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is going to be the last slide. I just wanted to show you kind of how it worked during coaching, because I think, again, this was one of the most effective ways we were able to draw teacher very close attention to the type of language that they were using during the discussion and the type of language that their students were using in the discussion, and not just the type of language, but the content. So basically, you can see like an excerpt from a coaching session where a coach and a teacher are watching a video and discussing teacher and student argumentation. So for example, I'm just going to read this. So he's saying, the coach is saying, all right, and he's reading from the argumentation rating tool. So clarify their ideas, restate each other's responses. So what are you thinking on this one? He's asking, like, how do you rate yourself? And the teacher says, well, I marked at least 3 times in that part that we watched where I did do that. So let me make sure I'm understanding. So you're saying that, so here teacher is basically looking at her own practice with this very, in this very close critical way, finding specific phrases that she used to address the issue of clarity. Let me make sure I'm understanding. So you're saying, and then she said, I marked 3 times when I heard myself do that. But I always kind of said the same thing each time. So now she's questioning her use of language and saying, maybe there are other ways to say this, or maybe, so maybe I could expand my repertoire of talk. And when I look down at this list, and she's referring to the list of prompts on our tool, there are other ways that I could be saying it too. Like, I would like to do more of this others, instead of just saying, I hear you saying, and what do you mean? And the coach says, I was going to say, I saw the revoicing move pretty frequently. So I think you're doing this good job, but I do like this. Can someone else say? So the coach kind of pushes her to a new level where she would ask students to paraphrase or clarify each other's ideas. And so, this is just an example of how this tool really brings close attention to talk and a very analytical way of looking at discussion practices. And I think I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alina. I will stop sharing your screen in order to see our faces.
Yes.
And yes, and I will, as Alejandra did the days before, if we can turn on the cameras. Entonces, si es que es posible prender las cámaras para que podamos vernos las caras. Y bueno, y abrimos el espacio para preguntas, comentarios, reacciones. Pueden ser en español, en inglés, no importa, como todos los días hasta aquí. So then, thank you very much, Alina. I just asked everyone that, could turn their cameras on, and I asked them to comment or make questions or whatever in Spanish or English.
You can also speak in Russian if you want.
Yeah, well, I can't. I don't know if someone in the audience is able to.
Just in case.
It would be wonderful. And yes, and I forget to say that please use the raise hands tools of Zoom that you can find at reactions with the reactions, or if you have not updated Zoom in the participants section. So I think we have two questions. First, Valentina, and then Ingrid. Vale.
Okay, I try to speak in English, okay? Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very illuminating for me, for my work, especially the curriculum materials that you present, in the sense that it's the focus that is very important to translate to the teachers the specifically things that they have to enact during the classroom activity. So my question is, in your the development program, in your program, where you put the focus? I mean, it's very important to scaffold these procedural enactments. So, but the program is more, I think, I'm not sure, but the focus more focus in the reflections, in the, okay, you have to realize this, or the coaching. But I think the focus is, I think, in my develop of my ideas, I think the focus could be more during the classroom, when the teacher put into practice this kind of, for example, the thing that you said about intervenir solo cuando es necesario. ¿Cómo hago esa, Antonia, si me ayuda ahí? ¿Cómo?
To intervene just when it's necessary.
Yes, this kind of knowledge, it's developed in practice during the activity. You know, so I think it's my question is how